Welcome to Elizabeth's Chronicles. If you love true crime, consider subscribing. Geoff Hunt, 44 years old, was a third-generation farmer. He owned as many as 6 wheat, grain and canola properties in the area. He was one of the most successful and wealthiest families in the region. He was well liked by everyone, very charismatic. He was a skillful farmer, sociable, and hard-working. His wife Kim was 41 years old, and an intensive care nurse. She was described by friends and family as having a wicked sense of humor. She loved gardening, horse riding, and cooking. The couple had 3 children, Fletcher, 10 years old, Mia, 8 years old, and Phoebe, 6 years old. Kim was involved in a car crash that nearly took her life. It left her with a severe brain injury and physical impairment to her right side. She had to learn to write with her left hand, and how to walk again. She spent over 6 months in the hospital. Her husband, Geoff, was by her bedside the entire time, when she was in a medically induced coma. When Kim finally woke, she had amnesia for weeks. The devastating brain injury caused a change in her personality. She could no longer cope with the children or Geoff. She could easily become angry. She would become infuriated over tiny matters against her husband. Some even said she was abusive toward him after the accident. The year following the accident was difficult for the family. Everyone had to adjust to Kim's disabilities, and they had to adapt to strangers coming into the home to care for Kim. She did not like people coming into her home. And the children were having difficulties coping with first their mother being gone for several months, then with her changes in personality and physical disabilities. In 2014, things were improving. Kim saw Dr. Younger, her psychiatrist, and was discharged from treatment due to her improvements. The doctor suggested that Kim's moods had improved enough to no longer need active treatment, and left the door open if Kim needed to come back if another crisis were to arise. In 2013, police seized all the guns in the home after Kim told a counselor that she was having thoughts about harming herself, and wishing she had died in the previous car accident. Kim was close with her sister, Jenny. Jenny states that her sister promoted awareness and fundraising for brain injury and road safety regularly. She said her sister had returned back to working, far less hours, but it was a huge stride in the right direction. Geoff was having a difficult time, working 20 hours a day for the harvest. He felt he could not properly take care of Kim with the onset of the harvest. On Monday, September 8, 2014, Geoff finished up with his day's work around 5 p.m. He was preparing to take the children to visit his father in town. However, Kim was being cranky, according to Lorraine Burke, who was one of the caretakers employed to help Kim after her car accident. Kim would stay home, but Lorraine said she did help her daughter wrap some chocolate for her grandfather. Kim and Lorraine walked over to a neighbor's property to help water their garden while Geoff took the children to see his parents, Lynette and John Hunt. His parents noticed that Geoff did not smile. When Kim and Lorraine returned from watering the garden, Geoff had already returned home. He already fed the children. Kim was very upset with Geoff, and scolded him. He did not react. Kim went outside, and Lorraine followed, trying to assist in calming her. After a while, the two came back into the home, and by this time, Geoff had already bathed all of the children, and had them in their pajamas. He had also made the school lunches for the next morning. Lorraine noticed that Geoff seemed depressed, and even asked Kim if he was depressed, and Kim said no, that she was just mad at him. She thought that he had left the children with her, while he went to play golf on Saturday. Geoff always sat on the couch each night, and watched Home and Away, with the children, until their bedtime, which was at 7:30 p.m., and this night was no different. As Lorraine was leaving, she suggested that Kim take a bath, to have time to herself. Lauren recalled the youngest child Phoebe, ran up to her, and gave her a huge hug, and kiss before she left. As she walked to the door, Geoff said from the couch, "Goodbye Lorraine, thanks, see you tomorrow." The interaction Lorraine had with the family was the last time anyone would see them alive. On September 9, 2014, Lorraine Burke found Kim's body outside the home. She contacted the authorities, who found all three children dead in their beds, from a single gunshot wound to the head. A note was found in Geoff's handwriting, which read, "I'm sorry, it's all my fault, totally mine." The following day, they located the body of Geoff Hunt in the dam, a ways down from the house. He had a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. In the inquest, the coroner said, "What Jeffrey did was inexcusable, the absolute worst of crimes. It wasn't premeditated, it wasn't motivated by malice, or to cover up other wrongs, but it was completely unnecessary. It was the result of an egocentric delusion, that his wife and children would be better off dying than living without him. The financial resources and family supports that were available to the Hunt family would have readily facilitated a marital separation, whereby Geoff could have continued to work the farm, Kim could have continued to work part-time, and both would have had extensive contact with the children they so deeply cared for. It is unfathomable why Geoff Hunt would not have actively explored those options before taking the outrageous actions he did." Family and friends brought flowers to the Hunt farm for several days after the bodies of all 5 family members were discovered. Robert Spangler grew up in Iowa. His father was a civil engineer. Spangler played football in high school. He and his first wife Nancy were high school sweethearts, who eventually married in 1955. The couple moved to Littleton, Colorado. In 1961, the couple had their first child, a son, David. In 1963 Susan came along. At this time, Spangler was working for the American Water Works Company. On December 30, 1978, the bodies of Spangler's 45-year-old wife, and both teenage children, David and Susan, were found in the Spangler home, in Arapahoe County, Colorado. The family all had been shot with a .38 caliber handgun. Susan had been shot in the back. She was found lying on the bed. David had been shot in the chest, and was also lying in his bed. Nancy was found in the basement, slumped over her typewriter, with a single shot to her forehead. A typewritten suicide note was signed with her initials. During interviews, Robert Spangler, who was 45 at this time, told the investigators that he and his wife were having some marital issues, and he had planned to leave her. He admitted to having an affair with his co-worker, Sharon Cooper. He told authorities that he left the home early in the morning, and was nowhere near the home when the incidents happened. He only returned well after the bodies were already found. However, his story changed numerous times, and 2 separate polygraph tests came back inconclusive to the questions about him being involved in the deaths. The gun used to kill his family belonged to him, and gun residue was found on one of his palms. In spite of all of this, the coroner ruled the deaths as murder-suicide. This tied the sheriff's hands. They could not get past the coroner's rulings to charge Spangler. They were forced to close the case, and all evidence was either returned to Spangler, or tossed away. Only 7 months after the deaths of his family, Spangler married Sharon Cooper, and the two moved into the same home, where his family was murdered. The two shared the love of hiking. Sharon even wrote a book about her hiking adventures in the Grand Canyon. Eventually the two began to have marital issues. Sharon confided in friends and relatives that she believed her husband was out to get her. In 1988, the couple divorced. Spangler married his third wife in August of 1990, Donna Sundling. The two moved to Durango, Colorado. Donna had 5 grown children, and numerous grandchildren from her previous marriage. She was an aerobics instructor. She did not like hiking like his previous wife, she was scared of heights. This led to the couple not getting along. In April of 1993, she decided to go on a hiking adventure once with him, to try to salvage their marriage. The two went to the Grand Canyon. On April 11, 1993, Spangler arrived at the ranger station in the Grand Canyon, claiming his wife had fallen to her death. He claims the two had stopped, just for a moment, to take some pictures of the scenery. He turned, and when he looked back, his wife was gone. Rangers recovered Sundling's body, 160 feet below the trail. An autopsy report indicated that her body had massive injuries, abrasions, contusions, lacerations, and multiple fractures of the neck, chest, and lower body. Spangler was never suspected in his wife's death. It was ruled an accidental death. He began to be a national spokesperson for the dangers of hiking in the Grand Canyon, appearing on TV several times. Spangler continued to hike in the Grand Canyon, with several companions over the years. After the death of his third wife, eventually Spangler made contact back with his second wife, Sharon, and the two moved back in together. On October 2, 1994, Robert found Sharon unresponsive in their home. Beside her was a bottle of Tylenol. She passed away later that day of a drug overdose. The death was not considered suspicious by law enforcement, and he was not implicated. Later on, in January of 1999, investigators from the U.S. Department of Interior, National Park Services, and the counties of Arizona, Coconino, Arapahoe, and Colorado linked the deaths in their jurisdictions and pieced the puzzle together. They met with FBI agents, and requested assistance. The case was under federal jurisdiction, under insurance fraud, and murder. They called on a U.S. attorney from the District of Arizona, who had specialized knowledge of the Grand Canyon. They first completed a history on Spangler. They found he was highly educated, intelligent, and a very successful man. He had worked in several areas, including public speaking, and was extremely charismatic. He had lived in different areas of Colorado, and enjoyed hiking in the Grand Canyon. A lady who was corresponding with Spangler through letters contacted them and turned over a letter where he had told her he had terminal cancer. With this information, the team made immediate contact with Spangler, thinking their time was limited. They needed a full confession from him, since they were lacking sufficient evidence. The team interviewed Spangler. The interview was video recorded for evidentiary purposes. Since his cancer could cause a stumbling block if he in fact confessed, the team brought in a medical doctor to analyze his medical records and ensure he was mentally competent. The first day of the interview lasted around 4 hours. Investigators made Spangler think he was a unique type of killer, satisfying his ego. The team confronted Spangler with the 1978 murders of his first wife and children, the drug overdose of his second wife, and the murder of his third wife in the Grand Canyon. By the time the interview was finished, he turned to them and said, "Well, you're naming one too many, remember?" The interview ended due to the late hour, and the investigators told Spangler if he wanted to continue the interview to call them first thing in the morning. To their surprise, he called the FBI the next morning, and scheduled another interview. In the second interview, Spangler described in detail how he murdered his first family. He said while he was married to his first wife, he had fallen in love with a co-worker, so he eliminated his family. He first shot his wife, then 2 teenage children. He said his son did not die from the gunshot, so he had to smother him with a pillow to finish him off. He denied any involvement in his second wife's death. He also denied that he murdered his third wife at the Grand Canyon, stating that he feared a lawsuit from her adult children. Investigators pressed Spangler to talk about the Grand Canyon murder, and advised him that killing several people over time does not make him a serial killer. He then admitted that he had pushed her over the edge, while she was facing him. After confessing, Spangler was concerned about how he would appear to the public. He was once a talk show celebrity, and respected in his community. He wrote a letter to an FBI agent, asking them to not publicize the case. He claimed that he was not like the other killers, who targeted based on race or sex. His motive was strictly that murder was easier than divorce. Spangler pled guilty in federal court in Arizona, to the murder of his first and third wives, and his teenage children. He was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. He died of cancer, at the United States Medical Center, for federal prisoners in Springfield. Geoff Hunt had everything a man could dream of: wealth, a beautiful wife, 3 adorable children, but behind closed doors, things aren't always as they seem. His wife's accident put more on him than he could handle. Instead of reaching out for counseling, or divorce if it was that bad, he decided his family was better off dead, than without him. He was weak and heartless. With Robert Spangler, instead of divorcing his wives, he felt that murder was much easier. He coldly erased his entire family each time he wanted to start fresh with a new love. He was not only a family annihilator, but also a serial killer. He was cruel and selfish. In the end, he died a lonely old man in prison. That concludes this episode of Family Annihilators Who Predate Chris Watts. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. Keep your eye out for the next episode as well as other true crime videos. Thanks for watching.